I'm Brodor, and this is Why We Game. My guest today is Alex Kammer, lawyer by profession, devout gamer, lifelong geek, Forgotten Realms fanatic, and at 12 years old discovered Dungeons & Dragons in 1982. Not to mention he's the executive director of Gamehole Con, which may well be the best kept secret in gaming. He's also a freelance writer, a game designer, an RPG collector whose RPG quasi-museum is on top of a pub, and he games on Monty Cook's table, which to me is a thing that I would do blood sacrifice on because I adore Monty Cook. Alex, how are you, sir?
I'm really well, Mike. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Is there anything, an area that I have missed? Is there something in the game industry that you have done? And there goes my dog, of course, on cue. Anyway, is there anything in the game industry that you've done that I've missed so far?
Well, not really. I guess the only other aspect is I'm one of the owners of True Dungeon, the immersive experience that has for years been at Gen Con and now comes to my show and occasionally to others. But I'm a partial owner of that company as well and help out my friends Jeff and Lori who actually own the company and run it. But yeah, you did a great job. Thank you. I feel like I'm about to be roasted.
Thank you so much. No, I appreciate that. I had asked you prior to recording if you'd ever listened to my show, and you're so overwhelmingly professional and dialed into the gaming industry that I was like, oh my God, I could really shit the bed here.
Oh yeah, don't worry about it, man. That's it's all good. It's all good. And yeah, I'm sorry. You know, the thing is about our industry is that there are so many great podcasts, shows. I struggle with keeping up on them, and I try to when I drive. You know, I try to have something playing so I can just keep toes in the water. So I appreciate your coming up and saying, "Hey, what's up?" at Gamehole Con. And I'll definitely check out your show going forward. So yeah, thanks for looking me up.
No, of course. So speaking of Gamehole Con, this year, Gamehole Con 8 was my very first one. I do another podcast called Fear the Boot, which has been around for much longer and really inspired me to want to do my own thing. A listener reached out to me and said, hey, it's more of a super fan and friend of the family than just a listener. But he said, you really need to come to my hometown and check out this con. It's kick ass. And it was. And when I got there, I looked at the quality of game, the quality of guest, the quantity of that quality of guest, and just the fantastic dealer room, the overwhelmingly well-organized and well-signed con. I was like, okay, this thing is either this elite, well-produced secret thing and a passion project, or it is the industry's Bohemian Grove. And I don't know what kind of after hours sort of, devil worship and dark eldritch magics are going on at that show. But if you told me that industry deals were done, over the bloods of freshly slain lambs at that show, I would believe you.
Well, those are very kind words. I appreciate it. And I can't argue with any of that. A couple of years ago, I had the surreal experience of sitting down in our little office with Ed Greenwood and Steve Jackson as they were talking about the prospects of doing a Forgotten Realms Munchkin, stuff like that. So it's pretty far out as far as the folks who come to our show and the reception that it's gotten. I always joke that it was a bad idea that's gotten out of control, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's really cool to hear people like you say that, who've obviously been to a lot of conventions and have been in this industry for a long time, and certainly know what you're talking about when you go to a convention and what to look for to say such kind things. It really means a lot because it shouldn't come as a surprise. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort to make everything line up as well as it does, at least as it appears from the outside. We'll occasionally have some bumps in the back, but we really try to make the experience for our guests and our attendees and our vendors as close to perfectly frictionless as possible.
One thing that you, having not been exposed to the show, I do have a tendency to kind of go all over the road. That's the magic of editing, is that I can cut all of my floundering out. But getting back to Gamehole Con, something that really surprised me was the number of special guests. When you and I were speaking, and I'm just using some pretty loose figures, obviously, you know the numbers much better than I do, but let's assume there were 4,000 people there. You had 40 special guests, like well-known names in the industry, from Twitch and YouTube, for Critical Role to old school well-known writers in the industry. 1 in 100 people at the show was a well-known quantity in the industry. How do you organize and afford to do that?
Sure. Well, we have the good fortune that people who come to our show want to come back. We have a very high retention. If you look at the exit data and the poll data about the other shows, I won't name names, because we're all interested in that piece of data, and a good result for other shows is in the 70% range. They're usually closer to 60. Some of the big well-known ones, you know who I'm talking about. But we're in the 90s when it comes to, once someone's come to our show, they almost always come back. And the same is with guests. The guest issue is actually a bit of a challenge because people come and they want to come back, and they'll often reach out to us and say, "Hey, can I come back?" And I say, "Okay, let's see if we can make it happen." We always offer, if anyone's come as a guest, they can always get a free badge for the rest of their lives. So that's baseline deal. But then when it comes to, helping them with the room and stuff like that, yeah, there's only, so much juice in the lemon. But because we don't try to make any money, that helps a lot. We're just trying to, if we break even, that's great. If we're slightly in the blacks, we have a few bucks to start the next year with. Wonderful. Because we don't have, I don't take any money out of the show. None of the other guys do. That affords us more budget. So we spend it on guests, cool stuff for attendees, free stuff, giveaway stuff for GMs, good signage, good equipment, all that kind of stuff. Because we're free from not having this overhead piece that a lot of shows, most shows, which are understandably for profit, and I'm not in any way dissing those efforts. If you want to try to make a living running conventions, good luck. But we don't. And because of that, then we're afforded this flexibility to be able to bring people back who want to come back. And also these guests go, industry folks, they see each other and they talk to each other and say, "Hey, weird sounding show, Gamehole Con. I know it's a weird name, but you should check it out." And so then when if a friend, these people all become friends, they reach out to me and say, "Hey, blank is interested in coming to your show. Here's their email. Reach out to them." They say, "Absolutely. I've heard nothing but great things. I want to come." It's become very easy. The first year was a little more challenging that way because we're the first year. No one had heard of us, and again, we have a weird name. So we were very. First of all, we got to start with here in Wisconsin. We have a lot of industry types that are nested here because of TSR. So this is a real gaming state. So we have a lot of folks who just live here who are in the industry. So that gives us an advantage. And then we had one of the guys called Wizards of the Coast and asked if one of the designers wanted to come. And Chris Perkins put his hand up and said, "Hey, I've never been to Madison. I'd like to just go check out the city." So we got completely lucky that he was willing to come our first year, and he's come every year since, except for this year because of COVID. He said he would come, but he just didn't feel comfortable. I'm almost certainly be back next year. That was big, having someone like Chris. And then Chris was kind. He said, "You guys really seem like you know what you're doing. This is a really fun show, despite that, year one was much smaller than what you saw." And people say nice things, and that's why we've grown so aggressively, is that people come and enjoy it and say, "Hey, like your friend fan." They becomes our best advertising. They become advocates for us. They say, you gotta come check out Gamehole Con. It's pretty sweet. And that's a long-winded answer of it because it's multifactorial. There's a lot of things that go into something like that. So that's why. And we're going to continue to do that because we enjoy it. I love having all these people here. I love having seeing fans have a meaningful chance to interact with people that they have only maybe seen on social media or whose products they get to buy. But at Gamehole Con, you've got a real chance. Your math is close. It's even a better ratio than that. To run into these people, if you want to meet one of our guests, you absolutely can. There's just because it's just a small enough show, and that you can meet that person to have them sign your book or whatever. That's definitely can happen.
If I had not been intimidated by unbearable beauty, I could have walked up and introduced myself to Satine Phoenix 50 times. That's not an exaggeration over the course of the show. Not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one deal. You know, we don't have any requirements for our guests other than you got to be at the show. You know, you just got to be there. You know, we would like you to run games, but if you just want to mingle and hang, great. So we don't have guests who come when they don't want to. They want to come because they love the show. They want to have fun. They want to interact with their fans. They want to interact with their other industry friends. And they like the dealer hall and all that kind of stuff too. So we don't have guests that hide in rooms or hotel rooms or anything like that. They're out about in the convention center and they're findable. And yeah, Satine was all over the place. That's a great example.
How do you keep it from scaling? And let me give some context to the question because I know I'm all over. I've quite scattered brain. Anyway, so
you're fine.
How do you prevent the show from scaling at such a rate it becomes more than what you intended? Because, and I dare to be hyperbolic and use the word perfect, but the show's damn near perfect in terms of the quality of event to the scale of the event, the fact that I can breathe, the fact that I not once hit somebody with a backpack, the fact that not once did I get hit by a backpack. I mean, it didn't have an aroma. I mean, it had all of the elements I want of a show, and I'm not trying to sound, all kiss-assy, but it had all of those great elements of quality, but not being this just flesh fest.
Sure. Well, Mike, I completely hear what you're saying. To put it really simply, we've put on the show that we want to attend. It's just as simple as that, and so that's those features you're talking about are exactly because, we want to go to a show where you show up, your badge is ready. It has your game tickets or your schedule. Your name is spelled correctly. The directions as to where to go are clear. Your games start on time. You have a good game master for your game, and everything works. I mean, it sounds kind of easy, but it's apparently difficult, and it is hard. It does take some effort to do that. But to get to your scaling question, we work hard to anticipate growth. And the reason why the production goes off as well as it does, that we spend a lot of time preparing. I mean, this should come as no surprise. Any endeavor that is complicated, almost everyone in life has had some opportunity to give a speech or give a presentation or something like that. Anything that is involved like that, invariably, the more time you spend in preparation, the better it will go. It's just fact. That's just reality. And so I'm fortunate that my game group, the Knuckleheads who play with me in this room, we were here last night. We were playing Descent into Avernus last night until about 11 o'clock. The fact that we have such a group of capable and talented people that I call my friends that are in the game group, so we can handle, despite the fact that obviously none of us are full time, we think about what are the challenges. If we grow by 40% next year, what do we need to do? How are we going to handle that? So we anticipate space needs. We anticipate the logistical needs when it comes to number of badges and lanyards and dice and all that kind of stuff. We think about it and plan. And so far, it hasn't gotten out of control, despite the fact that we've grown by almost every year. We grow about 30%, which is a big growth number. That's not good for most businesses. I would not. I'm involved in some actual businesses that are for profit. Would never want to see growth like that every year because that would be it'd be ruinous, quite frankly. The convention space, because of the convention center itself, that we haven't taken all the space yet, and now this year we are. In 22, we're going to have the whole thing. So we haven't hit a hard cap with space. That's been good, and there's plans to expand the convention center, which I think is going to work out almost perfectly with our growth. And because of we have such a good volunteer program, that was something that we were fortunate enough to get started. We have just wonderful volunteers that really care about the show, that really want it to stay like it is. And they know that the 8 of us that are in the Gamehole can't do it ourselves. And so we have this team of volunteers who are just so selfless and they work so hard and they do such a great job with customer service and really knowing learning the processes of the show so that we have these volunteers with real institutional knowledge who sit down and run the registration desk. I just wasn't back there at all over the show, and because I was in the way, I just realized these people are doing it better than I can. So, so that's why it's just those things, that people are passionate about and want to help. That we think about things, we try to plan ahead, and when we execute these plans, that's why. And, we'll see, I guess. This was the 8th show. We've never had the aspiration of having Gen Con. That's not what, that's not what we set out to do. And if it starts to grow and to that kind of size, and I don't know, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But to date, it's been very manageable, and we've got a good plan for 22. I certainly see show 9 and 10. Those are in view. I see them, sort of my guys, and we're ready for that. But beyond that, I guess we'll see. It'll take it 1 year at a time.
We discussed prior to the interview about barred holds, and you were like, oh no, Mike, throw it at me. So what are you guys doing different next year about food vendors? Because if I had one critique, the 3 food trucks, even for the audience that we had this year, weren't enough.
Absolutely. That's, you're absolutely right. It wasn't enough. And that was a frustration that we had. Historically, first of all, we had to convince the facility, the Alliant Energy Center, that having food trucks was a good idea in the first place. They resisted that, of course, because they want to sell their own spinning hot dogs and nachos and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. I didn't want to get into it. I used to be on the board of directors for a local convention called Geekway to the West. It's a board game convention, and it's basically, and I don't want to overhype it because obviously I am biased, but it is essentially the board game equivalent of Gamehole Con, but in St. Charles, Missouri. And the last year I was on the board was the first year that we did food trucks, and getting that damned convention center to concede, but then getting the only industry that is less professional than food trucks is escorts. You cannot get these people to answer your calls, to answer your emails. It was infuriating.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry. That was quite a bit of a tangent that was probably too far for a man that has daughters. But
no, you're anticipating my answer then. So we've had this challenge also with COVID that a bunch of food trucks folded in the Madison area, and then we had staffing problems for some of the existing restaurants. Now, for example, in a typical year, there would be a pizza place inside, a local pizza place, which is awesome, selling pizza. And there's another food vendor inside that wasn't there. And typically we'd have 5 food trucks outside with that number of attendees. But we had a bunch of late cancellations, and we're scrambling to find the food truck help that we did. So I guess we'll put it this way. That situation is very much on the top of our list for next year. And we already have contacts with some really great food trucks that are going to be there for next year. And yes, those lines were unacceptable. We had there are times when there were 30 people in line for a given truck. That just can't be. So we're going to again two-fronted approach to that problem. Inside vendors that'll be outside of the Alliant Energy Center. There'll be, in other words, real restaurants that are serving inside. More food trucks outside. And that shouldn't be a problem. But yes, that was on top of my criticisms. I try to walk through the show with a sober eye and say, what can we do better? And that was glaring. But unfortunately, there's not much we could do about it because the circumstances, people canceled late, and the show, the Alliant Energy Center and it's Centerplate Catering. They do the same. They have the same deal for Gen Con. They're at Origins. They inhabit these major convention centers, and they're just monolithic. They're very difficult to get to do things different because they just want to, again, sell their same stuff, right? Walking tacos and nachos. And they just don't understand, gamers, that we are here on campus for 4 to 5 days. You just can't ask people to eat stuff like that for that long a time. That's just not fair. It's not right. It's in any context. So there has to be more variety, and that's always. And historically, we've done a better job with that. It's just this year there was a combination of factors that didn't make it work out as well as we'd like. I'm glad we had at least those 3, but because it looks like we added 1 in the last second, and we were going to have 2 initially. Like, oh my God, that's going to be insane.
The other thing that you say about having a variety of food that I find interesting is that there are more and more health conscious gamers who don't want to eat that kind of stuff necessarily. For example, yourself, you're obviously very fit, but I understand that you do Tough Mudders. You do these mud races. What is that? I've never done a Tough Mudder. I am I'm definitely a couch potato style individual.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm one of those that will eat the vegetarian option on the food truck and so on. I try to be a healthy person, but yes, I am also somewhat of an exercise fanatic. So I do, I run and I lift weights and all that kind of stuff. And so I do often will do a Tough Mudder, which is a 12-mile obstacle course race, with the 25 obstacles and 12 miles over very, very varied terrain and some of it very difficult. And I'm one of those idiots who tries to win that. So I train, I prepare, and I do it. So that's one of those things that, I keep going with because I like just trying to stay healthy and try to stay fit. And hopefully I can spend a few more years on the Pebble as a result. So we'll see. Probably get hit by a bus.
Have you always been into fitness, or is that a more recent thing?
Yes, I was sort of kind of an indifferent high school athlete. I wasn't very, very particularly good at sports. I was but I was okay. Despite being a gamer, I always thought being an athlete and a gamer don't have to be mutually exclusive. And so I was one of those that, I was a D&D nerd that was on the basketball team. Yeah, so I liked sports and being active, and I just sort of carried that forward in my adult life, and that's been it's gone through all kinds of changes. And there have been years, when I was in law school, for example, I didn't exercise as much, and afterwards, and there was a young lawyer, I was super busy and I didn't exercise as much as I wanted to. And now that I've got my career sort of a little more stabilized and under control, I have more time to do things like chase my kids and exercise and run conventions, write books, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, see, you sound like a character out of Stranger Things, because here you are in the 80s during the Satanic Panic, being athletic and playing Dungeons and Dragons. Did you get guff from either camp? Because I must assume that you were the outlier and that there was not overlap.
Yeah, not a good deal of it, that's for sure. No, not really. I just I think most kids in the 80s who were gamers. For me, that was the late 80s and early 80s too, and I guess in middle school. We had your gamer friends, and you sort of talk game with your gamer friends, but you weren't broadcasting it like you do now. Like you can wear show your fandom with pride now, right? It's not like I was rocking D&D shirts at high school and stuff like that. It just you sort of had so. Yeah, you're right. I guess we were just a little more sub rosa with all that stuff because of all that. Because it wasn't culturally as accepted as it is now. It's just been, as an old gamer like myself, this is just magnificent to see this renaissance that our society's gone through when it comes to just fantasy in general. I'm a firm believer that Harry Potter changed the world. That's a completely different world that way. So yes, you're absolutely right. Although as an athlete, I didn't say, "Hey guys, you want to come over and after the game and try this game out?" I didn't do that.
Did you ever have to shun or distance yourself from one group of friends because of fear of mockery from the other group?
Not really. I guess it's no, I wasn't, I guess quite frankly, I wasn't popular enough to have that problem. I grew up on a farm. I didn't have, close neighbors. So my, hanging out with friends was a little more of a challenge, especially before I could drive. And, I'd have to ride a bike a long way to see a friend. And so those, I guess, and because I spent so much time by myself, that's why I was more into geeky stuff. I read so much as a kid, that's because I was a huge consumer of fantasy literature. But no, I never found myself in a position where I had to choose friends or anything like that. I just was, just like in how we move through society today, there's just certain people you talk to certain things about, and others. And I never attempted to proselytize or anything like that, as I do now. Now it's I run into people and there's any mention of anything that sounds a whiff of fantasy. I'm like, hell, what do you read? And and then we explore this. That I didn't do that as a high schooler, let's say the least, because, well, again, no one was really talking about that stuff. There's much more of a vanilla, at least here in Wisconsin, a much more culturally a vanilla kind of view of things, as opposed to now you have such great diversity. And with kids, look at my kids, who their friends are, and the kind of things they talk about and they do. It's amazing. They have such cool opportunities now culturally that we didn't have.
Amen. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I heard you correctly in an interview, you said that 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is your favorite edition.
That is true. Of D&D editions, it would be really close behind second edition. So 2E has always been my favorite edition. I played a lot of 3.5. I played a lot of Pathfinder, and I liked it. It's fine. It just got too crunchy for me, and that's just a personal taste. 5E was a breath of fresh air. I thought, oh my gosh, this is bringing a lot of the kind of the cool elements of the latter editions, but having an older edition feel. So I really do like it. And it actually got me into writing. I liked it so much that I decided to actually, had written stuff forever, but actually, publishing things. So yes, no, I'm a big fan of 5E for sure, of the editions, no doubt.
Well, that's another thing I noticed when doing my research is that if I go to Dungeon Masters Guild or if I go through Drive-Thru RPG, there are a lot of writing credits with your name on them, a lot of which, or most of which, I guess, are 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Your passion for 5th edition D&D, is that what led Gamehole Con to having the largest D&D Adventure League's presence? Your love of the game, did that drive that? Or was it just kind of fell together because of connections?
Probably some combination of both. As I mentioned, last night we played 5th edition D&D in this table. My friend Eric Engblom sat in this seat and ran Avernus for us. He's one of the Gamehole guys. So we really love D&D. Again, having Chris Perkins come out year one, that's when 5e was not even a thing yet. It was still called Next, and it actually wasn't even. That was very much in-house play testing. They hadn't even started the public play test yet. So it was year 2 when it was D&D Next. So that was in 2014. Anyway, because we got to have the good fortune of having friends at Wizards, and we loved it. And we have a lot of D&D players in this region, and we became known. It's just one of those things where your convention gets known for something, and our eventually call became. We were one of the first ones, really didn't have one. Us and Gen Con, and then Origins shortly thereafter. So it just grew so much, so fast. That's been was initially, in the last few years, one of our biggest growth areas was the Adventure League hall. We couldn't keep up with, all the DMs we needed. When you're trying to run a hall that has 100 tables running simultaneously, that's just a hell of a lot of DMs and just a big process. And again, we have a wonderful AL coordinator and a great team of people that do nothing but that. They just are running that huge hall. And so, I think it is. I think that we dig it. We love 5e. But, we had, at one point, we had a really big Pathfinder hall. Year 2, we had one of the biggest Pathfinder halls in the country. It was only behind, I know Gen Con was always bigger, but not very many. We had a really big Pathfinder hall. And because it's just organically, we're just sort of, whatever our attendees. I always told our attendees, when people ask about the show, this can be anything you make of it. We're just providing a shell. You submit games, we'll schedule those games, and people will play in those games. We had a pretty good spike of Shadowrun for a little bit, and this last year, I think it tailed off just because of COVID. We'll be interested to see how that comes back. Our Chaosium presence continues to grow. That's just been a straight up. We have a ton of Call of Cthulhu run at our show now, and it's going to be more going forward, clearly. So that's how these things grow organically. I wish we could say, that we could order things up, but that's not the way it works. It's, what you all bring to us, that's how it goes.
Not only do you have a passion for 5th edition and for writing 5th edition, but you're working with some pretty big names in the industry on things for 5th edition, specifically Ed Greenwood of Forgotten Realms fame. You are a fanatic, a devotee. How would you describe your affinity for the Forgotten Realms?
Yeah, I love the Realms. I really do. I'm an old enough gamer that I splashed around, of course, Greyhawk first, and then in the early '80s, and I love, I have, as you can see behind me, a raid are a lot of Greyhawk products, and I love a lot of those modules. But for me, the Realms was a more complete place. Was a place that, in my mind's eye, I felt like I could step into in my imagination. I've spent so much time in Waterdeep, I feel like I can walk through the city. I don't have that experience with any of the setting. In my mind's eye, almost as if I've been there, can recall the atmospheric or weather conditions in different parts of the realms, because they are very, very different. And, you spend enough time there playing, you feel like you've been there. The difference between the Bloodstone lands and Chult, and yes, I love the realms. I love what Ed did with it, and he's become a dear friend. He's become such a good friend over the years, working together and also coming to our show. And his explosive love of that setting is infectious, to say the least. He's just such a character. If you ever get a chance to sit down and talk to him about the realms, I mean, you would think that people would get sick of something like that, but not Ed. And he will sit down and talk to anyone about the realms, whatever minutia, fringe, niche part of the realms you want to talk about, and he loves it. He just loves it. So to be around someone that passionate and that explosively prolific is just a joy, and it's hard not then to share that passion.
Have you been playing in the realms since it first came out?
Well, what's interesting about the realms is that, and I didn't know this, is that the Forgotten Realms actually predated D&D. It started off as a short story that Ed wrote, in the early 70s. So it's been around for a long time. It just got the attention of TSR via Dragon Magazine. But yes, so I formally playing in it. I think our first, things in life, undergrad and all kinds of stuff were happening. So there are periods in my life where I wasn't playing as much as I do now, certainly. I can't claim that when the first Realms product hit, the gray box, that I bought it, and opened it and played right then. It was a few years later that I started noticing that there were more of these Forgotten Realms products, and that's when I started checking on them, backfilling and buying the stuff that I had missed. But yeah, pretty early on, I was certainly by the mid 90s, I was, into the realms.
Did you at that time have any inclination or dream that you would someday be writing D&D books with Ed Greenwood?
Of course not. No, that's not even, that didn't hit the radar. I was, trying to feed myself and get through school and, try to figure out what I'm going to do the next year and all that kind of stuff. So no, so I've always had the dream though of writing. I'm going to at some point sit down and really write a novel. Yeah, I know.
Because
Good question.
Between someone who is a father, you're an attorney by profession, you do gaming professionally as a freelancer, you game, you exercise. I don't understand when you would find the time to do, I don't know when you sleep.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, that's the big problem I have now if I'm going to start a project like a novel. So really, I'm going to have to retire, or we'll get my legal career down to very, very small. And that is sometime in the relatively near future. I feel like I'm going to do that.
I don't know if this works for you in Wisconsin. And have you always been, are you a Wisconsin native?
I am.
So you're born and bred. So that explains a lot because it's in the blood up there, man. It's weird. Just, talking to the people, because when I was up there, I went by Noble Knight and I met a lot of really kick-ass people at the show. And it's nuts just being in that area and just how much gaming and how it felt like home. It was wild. Anyway, yeah. I got myself sidetracked. I forgot what I was asking. I had asked you a question, and you don't remember what it was either.
Yeah. It was my dream to author DC.
Yeah, to be an author, and you were saying you'd have to retire. So yeah, my father, when he was an attorney, he's retired now. But the later years of his career, he had a small office in the house, and he just did traffic violations, DUIs, small possessions, things like that, and literally just tapered down his career until he could finally walk away.
Sure. No, and that's the thing. Time management is the thing we all struggle with, right? We all like to want to do things, and there's just so many hours in the day. A perfect example. Often, people talk about this wonderful array of shows that we have now, of media that we can watch. I mean, TV has never been better with streaming services, and so we're just talking about last night. The guys were, what the favorite shows are, and I watched so little of them because that something's got to give. I can't both take my one kid to hockey practice and coach the other kid's basketball team and do all this other stuff and watch Yellowstone or whatever. I just can't there's just not enough time for that. If I'm going to try to get at least a modicum of sleep and to try to, be able to function the next day. So that's where it is. So you're absolutely right. The time management and getting my professional work down to approaching zeros, because especially what I've learned from writing the D&D products that I have, which pale in comparison in scope to an epic fantasy novel, is just that. That's a big job. That's a big bite. I've got some friends, my friend Peter Brett, who's a New York Times bestseller, was a guest at the show, and he's become a buddy. Talking to him about his process and the amount of time he spent, that's a more than full-time job. If you're going to generate, full-length novels. So yeah, that's still on the horizon. But for now, I'm having a hell of a lot of fun doing writing the stuff I'm writing. It's just a really great time. I'm getting asked to be a freelancer on all kinds of projects. You mentioned Satine. I just turned in a couple of projects for a couple of her projects that are going on now. I have a few more that are coming in 2022. People asked me to contribute on it too. So if someone asked me to, write a 5,000 word piece of something, I can find time to do that. So that's been really fun and very flattering to be included in some of these awesome projects that are going on right now.
It seems to me that you are the type of individual who already has some conception of a plan for phasing out your legal career with your savings and your investments and your pub and your other businesses, but then supplementing your income with something that you love by doing freelance writing and getting a little bit more gaming in your diet and spending some more time with your family.
Yep, absolutely. I'm a planner, man. I really am. I'm painfully type A German person.
Okay. Well, now the German, that makes all the sense in the world. I didn't want to make an assumption with a name like Kammer, but yeah, no, the efficiency of the show makes all the sense in the world. My wife is part Dutch and I'm part German, and we often complain about the inefficiencies of others. We're like, what is the deal?
Yeah. Well, my mom is a German citizen, and my dad was first generation Swiss. So I was had a very Teutonic. My family, my wife, talk about a goofy aside. A couple of years ago, my wife wanted to do 23andMe, to do genetic testing. And I said, man, you can do that, but mine's the most uninteresting genetic test of all time. I mean, you can do it, but I can tell you what it's going to be. It's really, my family tree's a stick, So it was, I was 99% Northern European. Like, yep, right. I know right where my mom's village is from. I know what town. My dad's Swiss, and the Kammer family coat of arms is still in the Bernese Alps, and so I hear you though, and believe me, I'm being the processes, efficiency, anticipating problems and dealing with them in advance, and all that. That's very much in my personality and my personality makeup, and that gets reflected in the show. And the poor guys that, my fellow gamers who do the show with me, I'm sure get tired of the endless emails like, when are you going to do this? Where you said you're going to do this? Don't have it yet. How about now? And so it goes. And it works.
Gamers need that person, though, because there are so many people like me who are hypocrites speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because rancid French blood has sullied much of me. And that is the passionate artistic side. And so I need someone who has not been ruined by rancid French blood to keep my German side moving. But
there you go.
What influence, contribution, access do you have to the 6th edition that everyone's talking about? I mean, I'm not an idiot. So I know that when 5th edition hits the shelf, we're already discussing 6th edition, because from conception to print to shelf is a long, long time. But it's obviously a reality that the industry is talking about. You have certainly in recent years made your bones and influence in the industry with your convention and with your contributions for 5th edition. Are you doing anything with 6th edition?
Not formally, certainly. And Mike, make a great point. First of all, as a threshold matter, anyone who is surprised that a publisher is going to publish doesn't understand what publishers do, right? I mean, as popular as something that they publish, they need to publish more stuff so they can stay in business. It just is the way it goes. That takes away nothing from first edition, or second edition or any edition. And that's always been funny to me that people get upset. Oh, they're publishing a new edition of D&D, and somehow that takes away from something else that you already like. It's such a weird thing to me. But again, leaving that aside, yeah, of course, Wizards, if they're going to retain the D&D brand, which they certainly are going to produce a new edition of D&D at some point. The question is when, and now we're starting to get some focus as to when that is. What that edition is going to look like exactly, I don't know. I mean, I hear things here and there, but nothing that is, really definite yet. Because I'm not really sure they know. I think they're kicking it around in the lab. And what you don't want to do as a publisher is truly publish a new edition just to publish a new edition, because that's not going to be well received. If you're not going to produce an experience that's meaningfully different or meaningfully better or something, then it's not going to work. And I think that's what they're working on, is to try to. So, do we have ideas that are worthy of a new edition of D&D, or is it going to be a true 5.5 kind of thing where they're going to just sort out some things that every rule set has errata? Are you going to formalize that errata and then do a few more things and call it like a 3 to 3.5 kind of thing? Is that what they're going to do? I don't think they know. But I would keep the 2024 50th anniversary of D&D year in view. I think that's when you will see things. There certainly will be a 50th anniversary product of some sort. I'm not betraying any confidence by saying that, because that's obviously there will be. So what that exactly is going to look like still is unknown. There's some interesting prospects being kicked around out there, but as to how it ultimately shakes out, I don't know. But I'll be just like everyone else, watching and be interested to see what happens.
That is food for thought. The correlation of the dates, I had not put that together. So that's really an interesting thing to consider. No, I mean, that's one of the things that bugs gamers that a lot of people don't understand, but having been a former retailer, is that you can only produce so much material for a game before you have to consider doing your next edition. And these are my words. Obviously, our voices are very distinct. I do not anticipate them making a misstep like Pathfinder did, in my opinion, with second edition. It was interesting the amount of time that I've been in the industry to watch companies become giants and then kind of not be on the scene anymore. It's wild to me, particularly when I think about Wizards of the Coast, because I've been to a lot of shows, obviously not last year with COVID, but with this year and years prior. And I've watched WotC not come to shows with the presentation that they used to. Now, for them, I don't think it's because they need to. I think they've figured out a great way to have people proselytize their product and not have to do as much financial investment. And I think that your show is an excellent example of that, just looking at the effort that you guys put forth with the Adventure League presentation and haul at your show.
You're spot on, Mike. I can confirm that with a great deal of certainty that Wizards has made the calculation that spending a ton of money on shows it doesn't get a good ROI for them. Not even close to what they can do with their streaming experiences, where they just get in front of so many more people. And they still support a few shows. They fortunately they are sponsors of our show. They do with Baldwin Games. My friend Dave Christ, who does the Adventure League at Gen Con and Origins, who does a wonderful job with those. He gets support from Wizards still, but that's about it. And it's not a huge amount of support. I mean, compared to where Wizards spends money. I mean, we're fractional. We're tiny. We're not barely make the ledger sheet. But yeah, that's why, because they have other means that they're reaching so many more people without having to go to shows. And it's difficult to bring a team of people to a place. It's expensive, and then you have to deal with the whatever kind of, if you're getting some nonsense from the show, which certainly happens sometimes. So not every convention is as accommodating as others, and so it's very easy for a company to say, what are we doing? Why are we spending all this money when we could be doing something else much more intelligent and have much better return on our investment? And that's just simply what happened. I know there were some out there who said, "Oh, it's a sign that Wizards is in trouble." That is just the opposite. Is the fact. It's just the opposite. So that had nothing to do with they're trying to save money. That was just a very much a calculation based on real data that they had.
Now and again, I am not an industry insider, but I can, and I won't name names because it's shitty, but there are other companies that I would say they're no longer at a show because it's a financial issue, not
Sure.
because it was a calculated decision. But that's neither here nor there. I promised I wouldn't delve into things that you've talked about too much, although I have gotten into Gamehole Con quite a bit. I hope that we got a little bit more variety in questions than you've had, because I know that that's something that you talk about a lot. Another thing that I want to touch on real quick is your RPG collection. It's impressive. It is vast. I can see tons of it behind you. When I was listening to previous interviews that you had done, you were talking about the name Gamehole Con and how it came from your gaming club or your gaming group, the Gamehole, and the humble beginnings of gaming in the basement. And now it's become this thing with 3 rooms and a pub. And you even do tours to some degree or another, which I absolutely want to come to town and see it.
Sure.
Do you know Joseph Goodman, and what do we do to get you guys in a room to plan the Tabletop RPG Museum?
Oh, I know Joe well. I've actually written a few things for him. Let's put it this way: we exchange Christmas cards. So yeah, he's a good dude. They didn't come this year. He was very cautious about COVID. They shut down. They didn't go to Gen Con. They didn't go anywhere. So Joe usually comes. He's Goodman Games comes to our show. I don't know if he's come in the last couple of years, but I run into Joe a couple times a year. Hell of a good guy. Great, very positive personality in the hobby. He's been really good for the hobby and a really good guy. So that's already been done. He and Joe. Yeah, I know Joe well. So. Well, as soon as now that we're back on our feet and moving forward again in something that looks like normality, I'm sure I'll see Joe here within the next, hopefully within the next 6 months.
I don't bother him. I think when I met him once, I think I came on too strong because I was me. I'm being very reserved in our interview because you're very professional, but I fear that I came on too strong. But one of the conversations I had with him was if a gaming museum was ever going to be a reality, I can't imagine one without his involvement.
Sure. No, we all know each other, that are at a certain point. And so I can think of if there was a real interest in doing that. And so quite frankly, some financial commitment too, which I would help with too, personally, to go forward with something like that, a unified D&D museum or tabletop museum. I don't know what that'd look like. That's the thing. We're not really sure. Are we saying no? We're not gonna include things like non-TSR products. And there's some very interesting questions that have to be answered with when you come to a gaming museum. So is it just role playing games? Is it board games too? It should. Why not? Why wouldn't certain fantasy D&D derivative board games be part of that, like Dungeon and so on? So there are all kinds of lines that have to be drawn, sort of from a threshold standpoint before you could really move forward with the project. But once that's sort of sorted out and we have people that are interested and want to do it, Peter Atkinson, and I'll go right down the line about all the people that I would ping, and I would probably, if someone else, they'd probably ping me as part of it. Because I've always said all along that I have some real treasures that should be in a museum. I've done my best to preserve them and to display them here. And that's why if someone reaches out to me and say, "Hey, Alex, I'm in the Madison area. Do you think I can come see blank?" And if it works out, I try to do my best to make time and meet them here and, give them a look around and, pull whatever they want to see. And, because these things shouldn't be hoarded necessarily. I want to protect them. I want to, when it comes, like I have the original Forgotten Realms maps that Ed sent to TSR and Jeff Grubb received them. Once they came into my possession, I made sure I spent some money and having them sealed and stabilized, the ink stabilized, so they're right and they don't degrade any further. So for posterity's sake, this is a real important piece of history. It's certainly important to me, and I know it's important to you, Mike. So, I don't want to, those things that are in my possession at some point, I hope, will go to a proper, well-funded, well-conceived, with a board, with a real plan of how to preserve these things and to display these things, not to be too corny, but for generations to come, right? That's what I would love to be part of that effort.
What kind of law do you practice?
I'm a trial lawyer. So I represent injured people who've been injured in all kinds of creative ways, mostly car accidents against insurance companies. So I'm the insurers that you see nonstop on TV, the Progressives and State Farms and all states. I sue them as a profession.
Do people disparage your profession?
Oh, yeah. And I think, yeah, sure. I mean, lawyer jokes I enjoy them myself. And when it comes to a personal injury lawyer, quite frankly, we've brought a lot of that on ourselves. Not me personally, but man, there's some tasteless advertising out there. It's just as some jurisdictions are worse than others. I go to other cities and I see these billboards with it. Oh my gosh, that's just embarrassing. What are you doing? So I'm one of these who doesn't advertise. My work all comes from referrals and word of mouth and stuff like that. But you certainly have the right to advertise. But geez, I would like to see a little more standards when it comes to it. A little more taste maybe, because some of this stuff is pretty bad. So because of that, I'm not surprised at all that we've earned the disparagement with that kind of crap that's out there. So that doesn't bother me at all, because how could it not happen when you see these stupid commercials?
But being in front of people, speaking, taking a challenging concept and putting it into terms that the average person off the street can understand, obviously that has helped you a lot in terms of being a good storyteller and weaving narrative, but also presenting to an audience. So invariably that's helped you to be a better game master. Did you do any sort of performance or theater or things like that prior to going into law?
Yeah, no, I didn't. And that was one of the bigger challenges for me, was just the straight up stage fright piece of it. I was not a natural public speaker. I was always envious of folks in school that, who got up and gave a speech and were smooth and relaxed and calm and not, didn't get their speech didn't get fast. They just start starting over words and, all that kind of stuff. They're just smooth. That was definitely very much a learned thing for me, that as a young lawyer, trying my first case and just not sleeping that the whole week before and barely sleeping all during it and just getting out of there like, oh my God, I'm glad that's done, it just through trial, through practice that I got better with that. But yes, there's no question that the process of thinking my way through a case, the preparation, just like a convention, a trial is a production, and you have to think your way through your order of witnesses, what you're going to ask those witnesses, what your points of emphasis are, where the theater is, where do you want the jury to really tune into? This is the one thing I want them to take away, and how I'm going to highlight that piece of evidence. That thought process lends itself to just about anything. If it's creation of an adventure, creation of a convention, putting together a scenario to run for friends. All that stuff is, just the sort of ordered thinking has helped me a lot. And I have done a shitload of writing over the years. You joke, you say about the published writing that you see of mine. There is that times many, many hundreds out there, in terms of briefs and things that I've written professionally. So I did a lot of writing before I stepped into professional writing, before I stepped into published game products. And so that gave me a tremendous advantage. I will send, for example, I saw Satine at the show, and I said, Satine, I sent you that adventure, and I never heard back. Is it okay? She goes, oh my God, we love it. I said, you don't have any revisions? No. I said, oh, okay. Well, great. So because I try to write and send, and when I'm finished, print ready professional stuff, because that's what I didn't have when I'm writing a brief to the appellate court. I don't have an editor. I gotta get this done properly. I got one shot at to convince those judges to see the case my way. And so I just view that honed, I guess, a certain skill set that has helped me with writing. I can be more efficient, and I don't, and when I turn something in, I really do my best to make sure it's print ready, that I'm not creating work for someone, because I get that sometimes. I've done some little publishing for other people that, oh my gosh, this is really, I need to do some work on this before we can move forward on it. So yeah, definitely being a lawyer has helped a little bit, no question.
If I may, instead of an epic fantasy novel series, which, obviously I'm always in for another one. I'll read another one, right? I'm not saying that there are too many. That I'm not going down that road. I can have another hamburger joint, right? I'm on board. But how about a writing guide for adventures, and you take the lessons that you learned writing as an attorney and weaving narrative as an attorney, and then doing game adventures and modules and writing games professionally so that people like myself can be better game masters?
Yeah, I mean that'd be great. I mean those efforts have been undertaken. There's several of those products out there, and they're varying quality or have various effect. But that is borders on hubris, for me to say, I'm going to tell you how to write adventures. I mean, I guess.
Tell me how you write adventures, not how to, but sure. How you do.
Sure. Yeah. I'd be a little more comfortable doing that. But that would be interesting. That'd be to really break down my process, which I know is different from others. I have a lot of friends who write stuff, and I'm not the, as you maybe would think that I'm really heavy outlined. I'm really not. I have some waypoints, but I really, I was just writing something this morning. I was working on a little time between things on a product for Frog God Games set in the Lost Lands. And I wasn't really sure where I was going to go with this. And I just sort of started, I usually start writing, I start composing a couple paragraphs about the setting. I start to visualize things that are happening there, that can happen there, and that's where I tend to go that way instead of saying there's going to be a murder mystery and then there's going to be this and that. My process is a little more organic and a little less structured, actually, as opposed to a lot of things in my life. But that would be. I would be interested in doing that at some point, especially once I get a couple more. I have a couple big books that are coming out. Once those are done and hopefully well received. That'd be fun to try to do that. I'll certainly consider that, Mike. That's a good idea.
Let's talk about the big books you have coming out. Now, there's one that I have a full-on Robot Chubby to discuss, but you know which one that is. So what's the other book that you've got coming out?
Being kickstarted probably next summer, realistically, we're hoping, is a big adventure for Frog God Games set in the Lost Land setting, and specifically in a portion of that world called the Haunted Steppes. And it is a big epic adventure from levels 1 through probably 14, 16, something in that range, going across this massive piece of terrain with all kinds of interesting stuff happening. And I'm writing that with Alan Patrick. It's my co-author on that. He's a friend of mine. He and I are writing it together, which is an interesting process I've never really done before, is having a co-author sort of share. Well, that's not true. I've done some stuff with Ed, but that's a very different kind of thing. But with Alan, he and I are working on that, and we're probably we're past the 50% point, halfway point on that book. We're starting. Some art is being ordered, some cartography is being ordered, and the story is really coming into focus. That's going to be a monster. That's going to be a big hardbound book, which I'm very excited about, because it's fun seeing my development as a designer. The kind of things that I didn't do a couple books ago that I'm doing now. Oh man, I really wish I would have known that. I wish I would have known this now when I was writing that product, because I would have handled things a little differently. So I'm excited about this one, and really looking forward to the reception. Hopefully it receives a good one. So that'll be next summer that Frog God Games will be kickstarting that. I don't even have the working title is the Haunted Steppes. That's the region that it takes place, but we don't even have a real title yet. Yeah, so we're getting there, but that's going to be next summer.
Then you're also working with Ed Greenwood on Thay, Land of the Red Wizards, which I have said to you in email and prior to this recording that they are, in my opinion, the greatest villains of all fantasy. I adore them. I lay awake at night thinking about games where everyone on the party is a red wizard who focuses on a different school of magic, and the subterfuge and the espionage and but it's never come to fruition. But anyway, how did Thay come up and the Red Wizards specifically?
Well, we collaborated on a bunch of Adventure League adventures and so on, but our biggest collaboration before this one is our setting book for the Border Kingdoms. And that's where our Adventure League adventures are set for Gamehole Con. But we wrote and Ed did most of the work on that because he had most of it, a setting book just detailing and describing the Border Kingdoms. So that was really fun, and it worked out really well. Enjoyed the process immensely. And so we were talking about, hey, should we maybe do another one? And actually, the same co-author in the Haunted Steps project, Alan Patrick, is also a contributor in the Thay book. He is an Adventure League admin until recently, so he's been very deep within 5e, and so the current storyline of Dreams of the Red Wizards, he was involved with that. So he's a very much a modern Thay expert, I guess we'll call Alan. So he's writing for part of this too. So we it just looked like we're looking around like, why is there not a real Thay book for 5e? I mean, that seems just like the Red Wizards, right? I mean, they show up in almost every published product because they're such tremendous villains. But not even villains. They're such a tremendously powerful group in their single-mindedness toward power, but while being utterly amoral. They're not evil. It's not like demons or something like that. They can be evil. They're just amoral, and they're very driven and very goal-oriented to their own wealth and power. So that's a great talk about a great foil or villain or whatever you want to call them for any adventure, to have them as part of it. It's just wonderful flavor. And the fact that they haven't been more thoroughly detailed in a 5e product, I thought was a real blind spot. And and Ed and Alan were spoiling to do this book, and I was certainly interested in helping with that. So that's how it came to be. And we've been kicking around. I mean, it's all written now, and even as we speak, the final art pieces are being pulled together. It's in layout, and it will certainly be released print on demand through the DMs Guild before the end of the year. I don't know if in November, but I think likely sometime in December. And I'm really looking forward to it because there's some great stuff in there. I mean, we get to finally show. We spent a lot of time talking about the Red Wizards, of course, but what Thay actually is like, what day-to-day life in Thay is like. Not the Red Wizards are, as from a population standpoint, a fraction, tiny little piece of the population. Of course, they run the show, but what are the different tharches or equivalent of states or regions of Thay? How they're different? What kind of agricultural products come from them? What are their main exports? What is the different states or tharches' philosophies on life in the future? And again, day-to-day life of Thayans is a subject that's never really been addressed. I mean, before we got on today, I pulled my copies of Dreams of the Red Wizard. This was the release that for second edition D&D. This is my shrink copy and my play copy. This is really it for at least seminal pieces. There have been some other smaller things, but there hasn't been a lot of stuff on the Red Wizards. And if you go back to that, a lot of that has to do with very game focused for 2E and also very slavery focused. Mm-hmm. And that's this reality of what that was at that point. So it's a region of the realms that need to be updated and need to be expanded and need to be explored. And that was all that's all been living within Ed for all these years. He just goes, rah, and out it comes. And, man, the wealth of information that's going to be in this book for people who are interested in Thay, I think people are going to be delighted.
Is Thay still going to be bleak?
Parts of it are. Parts of it are beautiful. Parts of it are lush. They have to feed themselves. There's a tharch called the Breadbasket of Thay. I mean, it's beautiful. They have resort towns. There's all kinds of stuff that's going on that you don't know about. The Thay Mount is a bleak place where Zastam takes up residence in this dormant volcanic mountains. That's very, that's the imagery that most people have when they think of Thay, this sort of desolate mountainscape. That's only a small part of Thay. It's a very urban society. Most Thayans live in cities, and they have beautiful cities that are very very complicated, and they have powerful magics to help them build these cities, and so they're just spectacular. I mean, it's a contest among the wealthy to see who can have the fanciest fountains and tiered gardens and so on. And I think people are going to be delighted and surprised about how rich life in Thay is. And part of the book is I wrote an adventure, a levels 1 through 3, a beginning adventure in the book, and it takes place in the capital, which is Altabar. And it's called Intrigue in Altabar because it's political things, dangerous things going on in Eltabar that the player characters can get into and explore the city and try to survive the different factions and what's going on there. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think people are going to really dig it.
How are you handling the issue of slavery?
It's still, it's a fact of Thay's history, but it's very much de-emphasized. It's been de-emphasized for a number of years, and you see the transition from this product, Dreams of the Red Wizards, where it's very slave heavy, to the reliance on undead, which makes total sense. Zastam, the legions of undead, which makes perfect sense, and it's more of a logical answer anyway. If you're going to build a road and you could summon undead, why wouldn't you do that? To accomplish that menial labor. So that's how it's handled. It just is a more sensible approach to how the society actually work. Wait a minute, you have all these necromancers and they're screwing around with slavery. I mean, why? I mean, sure, they're autocratic and sometimes terrible people, certainly immoral, but they're also going to be realistic and sensible when it comes to their own resources. So that's how.
And that's my character's background, is that my parents are spice merchants. They have spice, incense, things of that nature, because aromatics, incenses, perfumes, and things are very important to Thay in society, because we don't want to smell that shit, right? So we don't want your undead. So sun bleaching and all sorts of stuff and different techniques to keep your undead from getting gnarly. That's really what my parents did. Yeah. So cool. I've got my background. I'm ready to play.
Well, there'll be some custom, 5th edition custom backgrounds in the book. There's going to be there's a new paladin oath. That you basically can be a paladin of the weave in this book. So there's going to be some mechanical things as well, new monsters, stuff like that. So it's going to be source book, adventure, and rules, and some crunch. Not a ton of it, but some.
A former guest had to explain this to me because I'm not particularly bright. I'm glib, but I'm not bright. I didn't understand the asymmetric nature of 4th edition and 5th edition, in that the mechanics for player are different somewhat than the mechanics for game master in terms of how you build a character versus how you build an encounter. I didn't really understand that. But recognizing that there's not a lot of mechanical crunch on the game master side as previous editions, is there anything mechanically that the Red Wizards are going to have, different feats, different abilities that are going to give them a little bit more oomph or flair or pizzazz to their spellcasting?
Yeah, I think what immediately jumps to mind is this concept of circle magic, which is going to be something we address in the book. So yes, there's a little of that. And yeah, your point of the asymmetry is an interesting one. And quite frankly, harkening back to our earlier discussion of what a new edition would look like, that seems to me like a place that would be addressed. If you're going to do a new edition, addressing quite frankly, the math problems with CR and giving some real guidance on encounter building, because it's not a lot there now. And those of us who are writing and designing it are we've got it figured out, but it's only through a lot of trial and error. That it really has very little to do anyway with CR, especially at higher levels. The CR math works at low levels much better, but once you get above 5th level, it gets like you might as well almost all but ignore it and come up with your own playtest reality. That seems to be an area that certainly can be addressed in the new edition, to have consistent math. I've had it explained to me why that happens. I couldn't explain it to you. I'd have someone like Mike Merles tell you that, but I've been told why it is, and when I was told that, it made sense to me. Unfortunately, I can't faithfully reproduce that for you here. But it seems to something that is solvable. But anyway, that's a terrible aside. I didn't mean to distract.
No. This is again. I mean, this is what we do on Why We Game, is sort of get to the root to it, which it sort of begs the question. I'm ashamed I haven't asked this already, but if I understand correctly, for you, your jam, if I remember your word correctly, was that world building is your jam. That doing world building is your thing above everything else. So I have to assume that the world building that you do, that inspired your desire to write a novel? Are you gaming in a world that you built?
No, not purely as such. No,
Okay.
I love settings. Period. I buy products often that I have no intention of playing the game, just to read the setting materials. Like a great example, I adore the Shadowrun setting. Just love it. I don't like the game. I don't like Shadowrun. Personally, it's too crunchy for me. You know, this endless dice pool stuff. Hey, and you love Shadowrun. I'm sorry. You don't need to at me. You don't need to tweet at me or anything like that. I get it. I'm sorry. I don't mean to insult you. It's just not for me. But I love the setting, and there are lots of products like that I dig. And then, so really, where I've been spending a lot of my time these days, and as much as I love 5th edition, man, I am a big Free League fan. I love those games. I'm often invited as a guest. I'm fortunate enough to be invited as a guest to a bunch of shows, and I'll be running a lot of Mork Borg. I'll be running a lot of Alien.
How do I play Mork Borg? I can't do it. I'm a middle-aged man with reading glasses, and I'm not artistically inclined. Dude, Alex, I can't play the fucking game. I can't do it. I need the 4-page PDF for the rules because I don't have the mental fortitude to figure out the rules. And there aren't many.
It's simple. Basically the rules are: you're a piece of shit in a terrible world that is dying. You can't do anything. You suck. You don't have anything. You don't know anyone. The whole world's going to end in 6 days anyway. So let's just talk about it. I mean, that's really what the game is.
Well, and I want to play, but I can't wrap my head around the mechanics.
No, it's not a campaign game at all. It's an art piece, but it makes for really good, fun one shots. So, I think the first convention that I'll be to this in 22, I'll go to TotalCon in Massachusetts. That I'll run Mork Borg. I'll run a table of that. And what's going to happen? We'll start with character creation. Like we'll go through the whole thing. Like you could get your weapon and it's a femur, right? It's just, so I'm like, oh, good luck, and then I'll have some terrible fucked up stuff that I run the characters through, and they'll almost certainly die at the end, and they'll be like, hey, did you enjoy that? And that's, yeah. So the aesthetic of Mork Borg is unbelievable. So I dig it. But Alien is a game I really, really like. So the Free League, the Year Zero engine is so cool. I dig the simplicity of it. So that gets back to, and that's why I'm, again, sidetracking you. I prefer a rules light type of, I'm a more narrative gamer. I'm not a crunchy gamer. So I like the BRP games, Call of Cthulhu, Chaosium games. I like because they're simple. I don't need to have a bunch of rules, I guess not in the way of, but also guiding the storytelling. I would like to be able to tell the story. And that's why 5e was so great for me, because I was like, hey, really, I can kind of do what I want here. And that's why for writing standpoint, it's my favorite and only D&D set I write for. I don't consider myself technically proficient enough to write, or 3.5 or even 1e. I think it'd be hard for me just because there's just more requirement there on the rules. So anyway, that's why the Free League games super into these days, for that reason, because the settings are brilliant, deep, nuanced, clever, dangerous, scary, weird, and the rules have a very gentle overlay that don't detract from the setting. That's really when I run a game for these knuckleheads up here, it's almost always, a Free League game these days.
I love Alien so much, right? I think that those mechanics, and I've only played through, it's not Chariot of the Gods, but it's the original, the first module that they came out with. I have played that, but ever since playing it, I want nothing more than to use that mechanic system to run Ken Height's Night's Black Agents. Because I'm not a big fan of Gumshoe, but a normal person versus an alien, how translating that, a normal person versus a vampire, oh my God, that gets my blood running, man. I want to run that wicked bad. But I'm with you. I think the free lead stuff is very impressive.
The stress die mechanic is so good. I think it's just, I've played it a bunch. It was about a month before Gamehole Con, we all got together and spent the weekend, and I ran Andrew Deska's Destroyer of Worlds, the Colonial Marine setting. And I ran that for the guys, and it was just, it was good. It was really, really good.
Okay, I know we're getting deep into the time, and I know you're a busy guy, but I have one subject, something that I definitely cannot skip: law and gaming, and where copyright and game design meet, and how much of a system can someone replicate and use without getting in trouble. And I'm not asking you for legal advice. What I'm asking is, are there clear boundaries in the industry of you can do this, you can't do that? What kind of stuff it would get you in trouble?
That is actually a subject that I've been meaning to do. I'm going to put together a seminar, and I'm going to actually probably at some point, the only reason I hesitate is that you said I'm not going to ask you for legal advice. It's hard not to have this discussion without my really giving some sort of legal advice. That's always for a lawyer that's a big no-no, especially when you're, so it just is, it's a path fraught with peril, but I'm happy to try to answer the question. And that is, don't steal real clear IP, intellectual property, right? You don't take the Wizards logo and put it on something that you're making. I mean, come on, there's some real obvious ones like that. They have an OGL and an SRD. Take a look at it, and it's very clear what they allow you, what's open source, what you can use. Just use D&D, for example. But then there's a game like Back to Mork Borg where they've made that all open source. They say, do whatever the hell you want with it. Create your own stuff. Use our logos. Use everything. Go ahead. There's no trade dress. Do it. So just understand, take a look at what system, what game rules you're going to would like to either replicate or use in your own stuff, and then see what they say about what they allow you to do. Now, I will say that sometimes these folks don't even understand the IP law behind their own product. So their interpretation of what people can and can't do may not actually square with reality. But the last thing you want to do is be in a position where you got to fight something out. You got to hire someone like me to help you, unscramble some eggs. You don't want to do that.
What if I wanted to design a game system that is similar to other systems? And you see it a lot in board games. I mean, some of my favorite board games, and I have a decent collection. Many of the games that I really love are amalgams of concepts and ideas that have borrowed from other games. So what gets you in trouble in terms of mechanics that are inspired by other systems?
The language distinctions there are inspired by, totally fine. Derivative of, not okay. And what that means, those are terms of art. But it's one of those things, I can't remember what the judge said it, but the comment is something to the effect, well, when you see it, right? That you have a rule set A and then someone's written rule set B.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You said rule set A, rule set B.
Yes, and if they look like they're really, that this came from that, then you're going to have a problem. You can clearly be inspired by and create a rule set as amalgamation of other things. First of all, if you're going to use it for your own use, you can do whatever the hell you want. This is only relevant if you're going to try to publish something and actually make money from it. And the other reality is these companies don't give a damn about someone who's out there printing 20 copies of something. It's not even worth the time to send a C&D letter, right? So these things only come into issue when there's a relatively big company that wants to do something. If Paizo wanted to use some monsters from D&D that are clearly not listed in the open gaming license, well then, and that's an interesting one. For example, like here, let's take the Illithid, the Mind Flayer. That is a piece of IP that the Wizards guards quite jealously. But I think if push came to shove, they would lose that case because the Mind Flayer, that concept, is the octopus head from Call of Cthulhu, and that's all. They took it from there. I think they would have and that's why I don't think it's ever been fought. I don't think they'd have a chance of losing that. And if you challenge someone on an IP violation, you lose, then you've got a real problem because then the floodgates have opened. And that's why really there hasn't been a lot of IP litigation when it comes to games because people don't want that fight, and they're right to not to want that fight. So I think recognizing that from a sort of realpolitik kind of view, you can skirt around a lot of this stuff and use it. And really, the chances of actually having something happen are pretty small. I'm not in any way encouraging anyone to engage in flagrant IP violations, but that's just the reality. There's a reason why there aren't any these battles aren't really fought because there's no real winners.
May I pose a couple hypotheticals? One, let's say there's a role-playing game called Blades in the Dark, and it was written by a guy, let's say John Harper. And let's say John Harper was heavily influenced by a huge video game called Dishonored and Dishonored 2. And nobody cared, even when somebody else comes on the scene and makes a Dishonored role-playing game from Modifius. And there whatever, you do your, or was it Free League? It was Modifius, right?
I think so. Yeah. I think so, but I'm not.
Yeah. So anyway, Modifius comes out. They have their own Dishonored game, which is basically what John Harper did, making Blades in the Dark. And now John Harper, hypothetically, has a deal to do a television show with Netflix. So what I'm waiting for is the Netflix show to take off and be a thing, and the company that owns Dishonored to be like, well, wait a minute, who's this John Harper guy in this role-playing game that is our game with serial numbers ground off? And not, well, like if I did it, I would drill down through the numbers because I know you can acid burn. I guess I shouldn't tell my attorney that. The point is it's the same bloody game and nobody cares. And it stunned me.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of stuff there, and again, I am not an IP expert. I dabble a little bit. I took it in school, but I don't practice that area. There are the issues of that they've already given tacit consent by allowing the game to happen in the first place, and that the barn door can't now be closed. That's a potential issue. I quite frankly don't know the timelines of that and the extent of use. For how long can someone use someone's IP before any rights are deemed waived? Those are real answerable legal questions that I don't know, quite frankly. But it's an interesting one, and I'm actually glad they pointed that out. I'm going to keep an eye on that myself. That's pretty interesting.
Is there a niche for a gaming attorney? Is there a place where, or is this just a fictional character that I have to make up who's gaming attorney by day and professional investigator, game master by night?
There are those out there that are certainly. I have a lot of lawyer friends who are gamers, but do I know? I don't know anyone who's a full on like I represent gamers only, and there's just not enough work to. I don't think keep someone going with that. There of course Wizards has their own lawyers, and bigger companies like that have their team in-house counsel, and because this is, the reality, Mike, is that this is still a really small industry. It's a really small hobby. It just as full on as we're into it and how we live and breathe it, and it's a big part of our lives. But it still is a very small hobby, and so that's why you don't have a cadre of real, professional lawyers that do nothing but represent folks in that fact scenario that you just laid out. It's just not enough work.
But probably better than I do, that there's also money in the industry. Yes, it's a small industry. For example, I am familiar with True Dungeon. However, because of the size of Gamehole Con, I was able to devote time, not only going to a True Dungeon seminar, but also sitting down, talking to the people who are running the Alchemical Exchange, or the Transmutation Room, I believe it was called. Yep. I had no idea that it was as big a thing that it is. So there are people that spend money on the hobby, and I don't know, I always just thought if a company were so inclined and wanted to make a stink, they could.
Sure could, but there's definitely a cause there. It's just that the cost of war is significant, and that often puts rails on a lot of litigation, quite frankly. I call it the litigation myth that we're all suing each other all the time. That's just not true. It's just demonstrably false. And there's real reasons not to. Our courts don't put up with shit. I mean, if it's a nonsense case, it gets tossed and you get sanctioned. It's expensive to go to court. You just don't do it as a hobby or because you have a hard on for something. That's not the way it goes. And the same thing, business people at the end of the day bring a sobriety to these questions when they think, well, is this really worth it? Is this the hill I want to die on? And often the answer is no, and rightly so. But yes, they could it? Sure as hell could. Especially if there's enough dough in it. You talk about like a Netflix series that takes off, and there's the prospect of some movie rights and stuff like that, and you're talking about some real dough, then absolutely. Then you'll see the knives come out. That's very possible.
The other question I have is there's a game I'm very passionate about that never came to fruition. And I've even reached out to the writer of the game who had a successful Kickstarter that never delivered to discuss purchasing the game from that individual. They've even committed to selling me the game, and we agreed on a price. Now they've gone radio silent, and I'm so obsessed with the idea that I don't want to let it go. But by the same token, it's so unique that anything that would be akin to it would be a copy. So I can't do what he was going to do. So I don't know if I'm just screwed, or if I just, hey, I'm going to.
I don't know. I don't know enough to answer your question, quite frankly. It's there's a question of where they're physically located, where you're physically located. We also states have very different interpretations of transactions like that. How far down the road did you get? So did you actually get to the point where reasonable people can look at this and say that was a contract, meaning there was a meeting of minds?
No. I mean, I'm pretty good at arguing and manipulating word and language because, I come by it naturally, and I did a lot of debate and mock trial and stuff. And no, I will be honest to a fault. There's no way I have anything that stands up in court. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's too bad. Well, I hope the other party recognizes that you would be a good steward of the game, and that it comes forward, whatever it is. So, man, sorry to hear that. That sucks.
Are you familiar with the concept of Satanic Panic, the role-playing game?
I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it.
Okay, so the guy who created it is basically persona non grata in the gaming industry. A lot of drama, but the point is, everything that your parents and the church and Chick Tracts told you about Dungeons and Dragons is true. You're members of a secret government organization that hunts down tabletoppers, right? So, for example, I'm at Gamehole Con this year, grab my program, I flip through, and there's a frickin' black and white map of the convention center gridded out like a D&D map. And I was like, well, if that's not begging to be a map in a Satanic Panic adventure, I don't know what is. If your if that building is not a seat of power for some demon who's writing D&D modules and poisoning children, I don't know what is. But the idea is so unique. I love the idea of being a government agent and hunting down the people, that I was when I was a kid, literally being oppressed and murdered by the government. I'm like, that shit sounds hilarious. I'm in. And the mechanics are utterly unique, and it's just gonna die. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah. Well, that's a bummer, man. That's certainly, it's an interesting concept. And I hope that sooner or later that it gets de-mothballed, and, you or someone else gets to revive it.
Well, I think that Satanic Panic 6th edition D&D hack, that's the direction that I am going to go. You were saying earlier that the edition wars were a bad idea, and that you don't really understand, why we would get upset like that. But I think for us as gamers, not you necessarily, and certainly not the new generation of gamers, but so many of us identify with that thing, that it's difficult to unentangle ourselves from that passion because it becomes identity.
Oh, sure. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug, man. I get it. There's no question. I have nostalgia when I look at the rule books for the Mold Day set, which I saw when I was probably 10 when neighbor had. It's almost like a physical sensation that I feel when I look at it. I'm like, oh my God, it just takes me back. And the Player's Handbook cover, which I bought in 1982, which is my first book I bought, a D&D book. Powerful nostalgia and powerful connection as to that this is me. But I realize that other games and other game systems don't rob me of that. Take nothing of that away. That's still me. That's always will be me. I'll always keep those books. I always love them. I'll cherish those memories. And the fact that other people are creating other memories with a different rule set has nothing to do with my feelings about mine. And that's the thing that I would wish that people could just bring just a little more perspective to, is other people's fun doesn't rob your fun. And it's just that simple. Having a healthy debate about mechanically what's a better rule set, healthy. I mean, that's fun. That's interesting. You can do that. but as long as just you stay north of vitriol about it, and that's where then you dip into true edition where where you're like, oh, 5e sucks, or 2e sucks, or God, I hate the weapon speed factor table in first edition was so stupid. You're an idiot for playing that game. Why? I mean, there's just no need to go down those roads because they don't go anywhere. There's nothing positive that happens. You're not going to convince someone that the game they like sucks. I'm never going to do that. Just like you're not going to convince them that their favorite flavor of ice cream is bad, right? It's just stupid. Why even try? So just enjoy your favorite flavor of ice cream and be cool with the fact that other people like other things, and that's okay. So that's why I don't mean to be lectury about it, but I see so much of it. I run some. Because of the convention, I have Facebook pages and stuff like that, and it just wears me out. Sometimes I have to intervene. I'm like, oh my God, would you just stop with this? Because it's silly.
All right. I promise this actually is the last question before I sign out. How did you get Monty Cook's table?
Oh, so he is from Milwaukee, and he was a TSR employee when TSR was still in my part of the world here. And when TSR moved to Seattle, he realized he couldn't take this behemoth, and it is a massive beast. It's a beast. He couldn't take it with him, so he sold it actually to Aaron Leader of Noble Knight. And
okay.
So Aaron had it for a while, and he bought it just to buy it. He never used it. He just kept it. He had it actually on display in his Janesville store for a couple of years and had it for sale. And then I went down there and I said, you know what, Aaron, I think it's time for me to buy that. And we talked about it for a while. Aaron's a buddy of mine. And finally we agreed to a price, and he even was kind enough to send his crew here with it in a truck and set it all up for me because I wasn't I'm glad because it's a little complicated. It all comes apart. And they did a wonderful job of installing it, and it's been here ever since. So it's been here for almost 10 years, and it's essentially not moved. It probably won't, unless we for some reason have to sell the building or something. But that's how it came to be. And Monty has been up here. Monty has come up to see it. He's been a guest at the show, and he will be again, certainly. And he came up and saw this is the table, and we talked about it and the fun that he had on it, and the kind of games that he played back in the day on it. And he was interested to hear kind of what the nonsense we do. It's cool. It's a pretty neat piece of history, and I'm delighted to have it.
I'm so jealous because I'm a Monty Cook fanatic. I think that the 3.5 Dungeon Master's Guide is arguably one of the best, just concise set of rules ever. I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah. But, well, Alex Kammer, thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate you sitting down and talking with me today. And hopefully I will have the opportunity to come out to the Gamehole and tool around. And maybe if I'm lucky, you can put a good word in with me with Noble Knight, because they told me that there's no way Aaron would ever sit down with for an interview.
Yeah, that would be difficult.
Why We Game is a production of the Influence Foundation. All rights reserved. Editing by Brodor and music by 99 Instrumentals.